Sisters, you are receiving copy at the tables. We ask simply that you let that rest. Just let it rest for the moment, please. Dear sisters, and I know we have a brother in here. Perhaps we have more than one. We began this day that in the consciousness that the Lord is risen. The Lord is risen. Now, this day is given us as a movement that begins for 3 days into consciousness of what the chapter planning committee has been calling a movement of God's energy, the movement of relationship, mission, and identity. These movements at this general chapter are being perceived through the lens of cosmic consciousness and anti-racism. Understanding that anti-racism flows and is in union with cosmic consciousness. These values are identical for these movements of grace. Inclusion, diversity and communion, wholeness, the integrity of all, the essential oneness. And today our blessing is that we reflect on anti-racism. The chapter planning committee describes this day as in purpose, that our presentations and dialogues will deepen our understanding of the perpetuating nature of power differences among peoples. And so it is that we welcome the day. Sister Sharon will introduce our speakers.
Before I do introduce our two speakers this morning, I would like to welcome those members of our SSTART team who could be with us today. So would you raise your hands? Those of you who are here. Thank you. We're not only grateful for your presence among us, but for the balance and authority that you will add to our discussions today. Kelly Wickham Hurst is a 23-year public and private school educator here in Springfield. In 2012, she went through a crossroads training, found herself literally transformed, and immediately joined the Springfield Coalition on Dismantling Racism, which we know more familiarly as SCOTR. Utilizing her position in the school district, she kept pushing for a discussion about the disparities in the system, about our complicity, and about our ability to change things. She soon found herself given the label of troublemaker, which she has since appropriately renamed trailblazer. She says that she proudly stands on the shoulders of her father, a black man from New Orleans who did the work he needed to advance equity conversations, and who continues to encourage her to stand on her own truth. A speaker, a storyteller, and a writer, she has started the nonprofit Being Black at School, and I encourage you to look it up on the internet. It's a movement for equity and safety for Black students, which does advocacy and policy work as well as professional staff development. Being Black at School. In 2017, she began full-time work with Crossroads as a regional organizer and trainer. She and her husband are the parents of 6 adult children and the grandparents of 2. Sister Mary Jean Traeger has been involved in the work of anti-racism for almost 18 years. More than 16 years ago, she helped to create START, the Springfield Dominican Anti-Racism Team, and during the last 6 years has also served on the team of SCOTR. She has worked as a member of both of those teams and has also served as hired staff for SCOTR, which has enabled her to learn both as a team participant and as a leader and organizer. Both women look forward to sharing with us their metaphor of Center Borderlands, where they will analyze complex power arrangements and the effects of white supremacy on both white people and people of color. Their analysis will demonstrate how the dominant white center culture is able to maintain power over people of color who live on the borders. We look to be informed, challenged, and emboldened to do what we must for the life of the world. So Kelly and Mary Jean.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I realize I'm one of the taller speakers, excuse me. Yeah, she'll be pulling it right back down. I have to say, I would not be here if it were not for START. I would not be in this room, I would not be doing this work if START did not see the importance of having this conversation and trying to make change in this community. So I thank them for their vision that was able to birth out SCOTR and allowed me to see the world in a way that I had been seeing but without an analysis. And with that, I'd like to share just a little bit more about my background. Out of the two of us on the stage, I was the troublemaker. I don't know if you caught that. It was me. I grew up in Chicago on the South Side in Hyde Park, which is a very, very diverse area. And I attended St. Thomas the Apostle School for my elementary school years. My father, being a black man from New Orleans, who also went to all Catholic schools that were all black in New Orleans. And my mother grew up in Lemon, South Dakota. She's a white woman who grew up on a farm, and they met in Chicago. And my mother also went to all Catholic schools. My grandmother, Marguerite, who I was thinking of this morning, was such a woman of God. She cooked for her priest until she could not cook anymore, until she had to be put in a home. And I miss her very much. And I think that I feel very lucky that I have this mixed race identity that I have had to understand that has helped to shape me. Part of what has shaped me is my understanding of race, being the very light-skinned daughter of a black man. And when I was out with my father, very often I would find myself in places where white women would actually come up and accost us and ask my father where he stole me from, or ask my father if I were kidnapped, and sometimes would ask me if I was safe and if I knew this man. And it didn't make any sense to me as a young child because that was my daddy. But it made me start to understand race. It made me start to understand ways in which we get shaped and who gets to determine who belongs and who doesn't. And I have felt very much like I don't belong. And the analysis that Sister Mary Jean and I want to share with you from Center Borderlands will help expand that. And it helps me to understand that if I look at this power analysis of race, that I can understand the ways we've been shaped. And when I say we, I mean every single one of us in this room. We have been shaped in ways that have been hidden to us, and it should make us upset. It should make us question, and it should make us dig deeper into ways in which we ourselves have been shaped in this country. I also would like to say that one of the things that our family did for us was move us to Hyde Park because it was so diverse, I grew up under the assumption that everyone had a life like we did, that everyone went to Catholic school, and that after school, everyone went to the Jewish Community Center for their activities where we learned to keep kosher. And that everyone had a Mexican babysitter who was instructed only to speak Spanish to them. So my view of the world is pretty diverse. And with that, I'm going to apologize. I know we have Peruvian sisters here, but I want to share one thing with them, and I'm just going to say, lo siento, first and foremost, porque de tal manera amo Dios al mundo. Para que todo aquel que no crees no se pierda, mas tenga vida eterna. Juan 3:16. It is the only thing I've ever memorized in Spanish, and it is John 3:16. And I'm sorry for probably messing that up. With that, I'm going to invite Sister Mary Jean to come and set up our Center Borderlands activity, and now you can touch the papers that are on your table.
I'll be pulling this down. I know everyone in this room, and every one of you know me. So my introduction is going to be brief and specific, I guess I would say. One of the things I am most pleased about our being here together is that we have committed ourselves to being anti-racist. And we have been working on this officially or formally for almost 20 years. And we would not be able to do this at all if we didn't have the presence and the constant support and interaction and teaching and learning experience of the people of color who have committed themselves since the beginning to be part of our team. And so we're proud to say that we can have a team that is 50% white and 50% people of color, and most of them have been with us for those 16 years that have been official. So they're going to be coming in during the day, and please introduce yourselves to them and have them feel as welcome as they make us feel by their presence. So that's an important thing that I wanted to say. One more thing is personal, and it's short. You all know, because I wrote a letter, that I'm having problems with memory loss. And Kelly and I have prepared well, and I think we're doing well. And the only thing that I could say is, please do not be offended if I don't call you by name. Sometimes it comes, sometimes it doesn't. But we're very happy to be here. And if there are other ways that I forget words, that's why I have a partner here. And, you know, it will be fine. So thank you for being present here, and thank you for putting this on the agenda, because it is so, so important. When we talk about Borderlands, first of all, I want to say the reason we're having this training is because it was not available to us when we first started START. It was out there, but we weren't participating in this part of the training. And so ever since we found out about this Center Borderlands presentation, many of our START members, especially our people of color, have said to us, we need to get that in our repertoire also. So here it is, and we hope that it will be helpful to you, because we believe it's one of the most useful tools that we have from Crossroads. So the problem is racism. And racism involves abuse of power. And that's why we need to continually do power analysis. We need to be continually looking for the ways that racism sneaks its way into our culture or blatantly, pushes its way in, whatever it is. We need to be aware of it. We need to be responsive to addressing it, and we need to continue to call ourselves to be responsible for helping to dismantle it. We are not responsible for causing racism, but we are responsible for working to dismantle it. And that's what this process of Center Borderlands helps us to do in a particular way. It's a metaphor. It's a metaphor that helps us to understand what happens, sometimes under the surface, sometimes blatantly. It was originated by a woman named Gloria Anzaldúa, who was a Chicana feminist, lesbian activist, who wrote a book, among other things, La Frontera, the Borderlands. And in that book, she uncovers or explains in very powerful ways how this works in our system, particularly in our white dominant culture system. So you have on your tables a chart or a diagram that has a quote from Gloria Anzaldúa, and we have 5 people who have volunteered to come forward and read that. You can read it yourselves, but since some of it's in Spanish, we thought it might be helpful, and it's helpful to hear what she has to say because it's so strong. So would the people who have those papers please come forward? I think Adele, you're first, and then you know what order you're in. Okay. And you need a microphone. Do we have an extra one? No, she's got one there. Okay. Okay. And I'd ask you to read it slowly and reflectively, and then pass the microphone on to the next person. There should be a 5th person. Judith. Kathleen. Sorry about that.
The U.S.-Mexican border es una herida abierta where the third world grates against the first and bleeds. And before a scab forms, it hemorrhages again. The lifeblood of 2 worlds merging to form a third country, a border culture.
Borders are set up to find the places that are safe and unsafe, to distinguish us from them. A border is a dividing line, a narrow strip along a steep edge. A borderland is a vague and undetermined place created by the emotions residue of an unnatural boundary. It is in a constant state of transition.
The prohibited and forbidden are its inhabitants. Los atravesados live here. The squint-eyed, the perverse, the queer, the troublesome, the mongrel, the mulatto, the half-breed, the half-dead. In short, those who cross over, pass over, or go through the confines of the normal.
Gringos in the southwest of the U.S. Southwest consider the inhabitants of the borderlands
transgressors, aliens, whether they possess documents or not, whether they're Chicanos, Indians, or blacks. Do not enter. Transgressors will be raped, maimed, strangled, gassed, shot.
The only legitimate inhabitants are those in power, the whites and those who align themselves with whites. Tension grips the inhabitants of the borderlands like a virus. Ambivalence and unrest reside there. And death is no stranger.
Take just a minute or two to reflect on what you've heard and what you've read. And the Spanish-speaking people should have a full Spanish version also. There's one more thing I wanted to say about Gloria Anzaldúa. Her material has been interpreted by Crossroads, so we don't do what she did, but we use her material with her permission and have interpreted it to help us do our work of anti-racism. And basically, Crossroads has used this material to answer, among other things, a basic question. How does dominance and power get constructed in the United States? How does dominance and power get constructed in the United States? It didn't just burst forth from the earth. It was deliberately constructed. So how does that happen? And we begin by identifying the relationships of dominance and exploitation that have been present in the United States for so long that we think it's normal. We who live here, we who are white in particular. That's how strong it is that it has been able to take hold in our country from the beginning and continues to have its effect, not just on white people, not just on people of color, everyone, and even everyone who visits us. These are the white dominant culture that we're talking about. And I want to make just a point about our Peruvian sisters who are with us. We talked together yesterday because we're used to thinking about what is their culture, what is our culture, and the truth of the matter is that every time they come to visit us, they enter the white dominant culture. Not because they want to, but because it is so powerfully dominant. They can't escape it. And so we're asking them to join us in this analysis, not because they don't do their own analysis of culture and racism in their own country, they do. But because when they come to be with us, or for any other reason, and this is true of every colonized culture, they are affected, as everyone is, by this white dominant culture. So we all need to understand it. And so we thank you that you are here to be with us and to participate in this way. When you come to this country, you're confronted with white dominant culture, even if you don't want to be, even if you weren't born into it. Everyone who comes here is affected. And we're inviting all of us here to think about the ways that this white dominant culture affects all of us. From the time you step off the plane, or even beforehand if you've ever tried to get a visa. So it is a powerful, dominant effect, and our analysis needs to be strong. And that's what we're going to be doing. So we're going to start with a question. And Kelly's going to be describing this for us. The question is, while she's getting this ready, I can ask it a couple of times. Who in the United States is presumed to be normal, standard, good, moral, and fully human? Now, because we're Christian and Catholic and all of that, we might say everybody. Well, that's not true, and we know it's not true. So who in this American and North American culture in the United States is considered to be normal, standard, good, moral, and fully human? And you can just call out groups of people, and Kelly will put them in this center, because that's where they put themselves. That's where we put ourselves without even thinking about it. So,
I'll start with my silliness. Minnesotans.
okay.
Educated people.
Educated people. I'll repeat because so we don't have to pass microphones.
Can I say Midwestern?
Yeah.
Okay.
White males.
White males. All Anglos. Middle class economic benefiters. Okay.
Upper class.
Upper class.
All Anglos who have stable mental health.
Anglos who have stable mental health. Educated people. Who else?
Christians.
I'm sorry.
Christians.
Christians, of course, yes.
Heterosexual.
Yes, heterosexuals.
Husband, wife, male, female.
Okay. Just those identifications. Nuclear families. Politicians. Really? Who else?
Those on the right side of the tracks.
On the right side of the tracks, and all that that means. And we know what it means if we're white, especially.
English speaking.
English speaking, yes. All of those are considered privileged.
Homeowners.
Homeowners.
Those who follow the law.
Those who follow the law. Athletes and artists. I would like to say, and also those who make the laws.
So we got politicians.
Just in case we didn't know what it meant. Employees? Employed. People who are employed. Yes.
Corporate leaders.
Corporate leaders.
Those free from disability.
Those free from disability. Judges, okay? And you could go on and on and on. Any you want to add, Kelly?
Yeah, let's think about values. What are the values of the dominant center? What are the beliefs?
Hardworking.
Organized?
Organized, yeah.
Hardworking?
Hardworking.
On time.
On time. The Peruvians know what that looks like. Efficient.
Patriotic.
Patriotic. Analytical.
Clean.
Yep, I'm picking up.
Clean, did I hear?
Yeah. Yeah.
Articulate.
Articulate, and I see another hand back there.
Quiet when they're supposed to be. Like right now, we're quiet when we should be and not raucous.
Okay, so we follow the rules, and that's one of the big ones sometimes.
There are a lot of people who would put religious in that category.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I think that you're right, and I think that if we drill down, we would say that the dominant culture is Christian,
Right.
out of the religious culture.
Mhm.
Clergy.
Clergy.
Docile.
Docile?
Okay.
Well, only for certain people. Women, right?
Right. Ah, which reminds me. Okay, you've got white males in there. Anything else? Okay, so these are the people that our society in this country considers normal, standard, good, moral, fully human. These are the ways of living and thinking and being that are defined in this culture as civilized, moral, and normal. We'll leave this up here and you can take a look at it later.
If you can read my writing. Talk
Yep.
fast.
Okay, the second question, because this is the center. If the center is the place of power and influence, I didn't hear anything about power, but I might have missed it. Whom does the center presume to be abnormal, not standard, not good or moral or fully human? Women.
Incarcerated.
Incarcerated.
The poor.
The poor.
Homeless.
Homeless.
Uneducated.
Uneducated.
People of color.
People of color.
Non-Christian.
Non-Christian. I hear one over here.
Addicted.
Addicted.
Homosexual.
Homosexuals.
Disabled.
I'm sorry, somebody over here had one.
Disabled.
Disabled.
Jobless.
Jobless.
Transgendered.
Transgender.
I'm going to have to put LGBTQ.
Yeah.
If that's okay.
It's got all of them in it, or all that we know. Okay.
Mentally unstable.
Unstable.
Mentally.
Mentally unstable.
Non-English speaking.
Non-English speaking.
Elderly.
Elderly. Single parent families.
Those on Medicaid or government assistance, SNAP programs.
On government assistance.
Got it.
Okay.
Dark skin.
Dark skinned.
Not self-confident.
Not self-confident. Disfigured.
People with accents.
People with accents.
People who are lazy.
People who are lazy or considered lazy.
Can I put that in quotes?
Yes.
Gay marriage.
Gay marriage.
Illegals.
Illegals.
Undocumented.
Undocumented. When we were reading that quote from Gloria earlier, you can't help but think about what we've done at the border. You know.
Say Native Americans.
Native Americans, yes.
Anybody who's not a European ancestry.
Anyone of not European ancestry. Okay, and we can continue to add to this, but
Go with, do the values and beliefs again.
yes. So, These are the ways of living and thinking and being that are considered not to be civilized, moral, or normal. And we put them in the borderlands.
So if we put on time in the center, what would we put in the borderlands?
That's a good way to fill in.
And then it gets interpreted, unthoughtful, thoughtless, thoughtless.
Irresponsible.
Irresponsible. So what are we doing to the people in the borderlands? We are increasing the negativity by making decisions or judgments that are negative about their behavior. No matter what the reasons are for their behavior, the center has the privilege and the power to call it what they will, and does, often, starting at the top. Okay, so we're going to be looking then at how these arrangements keep in place. You ready to do that, or do you want to? Okay, we know we're having a break in here sometime. But,
Is it now?
No. Okay.
So what we want to look at with this particular arrangement, and a couple of reminders. The center names itself, and the center also names the borderlands, which is why when you mention some things, I put them in quotation marks. We would say that people are undocumented, but the center would call them illegal aliens, right? We would say that there are addicts out here in the borderlands, but are there any addicts in the center? Absolutely. And they have different names for that. And there are different ways of thinking and looking at the values that go with the white dominant center. So for instance, in the 90s, we had a crack epidemic. And now we have an opioid crisis. So we think about the ways language is used from the center to determine who gets to be helped and who gets to be seen as fully human. And if what we're looking at are two different drug issues, then we look at the ways in which we're responding to opioid as a crisis that includes mental health services, it includes insurance, it includes stays in places where those people can get help so that they can become fully human again and contribute to society. Whereas in the 90s, we criminalized crack cocaine. We criminalized crack cocaine at 18 times the amount of offense as powder cocaine, which was mostly done by the center. So how does this get lived out? And what does this mean for us? And if this is the setup that we're living out, how does this power arrangement affect both the center and the borderlands? So I want to give you a moment at your tables to have a conversation. And I want you to have two conversations. I want you to ask the following questions. How does the center view the borderlands? How does the center look at? How do they view them? What is it that they think of the borderlands? And then ask this question. How does the borderland view the center? What do they think of the center? How do they interact with the center? We'll give you a few minutes of discussion time at your tables, and then we're going to come back and share some of the things that you've been sharing. I'm going to confess we gave a little bit more time for you to have these conversations because you got right to it. And that's a good thing. It means that you were ready to talk about this. It means that you were recognizing this particular setup that's going to remain here. And I'll pull it back up in just a moment. But for right now, let's start with your discussions that you had at your tables about how the center views the borderlands. What are some of the things that you said? Yes?
A threat.
They are a threat.
Dangerous.
They are dangerous.
Drain on society.
They're a drain on society.
Expendable.
Expendable.
Have no benefit to us.
They have no benefit to us. And I like that you said that because, and I'm going to put us in quotation marks, because that is exactly the way the center views it. If you have no benefit to us, we're the determiners of what is beneficial. I saw another hand.
Sometimes, if you're in the center, you look at them benevolently. You want them to become.
Oh, I love that. Benevolently.
Yeah.
That what we do. Say some more about that.
It's like, okay, as religious women, we want to reach out and help them. We want them to absorb our culture. We want them to be educated the way we were educated.
Absolutely, right. If schooling was fine for me, then schooling should be fine for everyone else, right? Not even thinking at that particular point about the way schools as an institution and as a system were set up for whiteness, right? So I appreciate you saying that, right? That in being benevolent, they want to help, fix, and save, right? Marceline?
I think sometimes the center also looks at the Borderlands as something they might to go out and enjoy, to use in some way, and then come back.
Enjoy and use, like on a service trip. On a service trip that might...
Music or something like that.
Right, a single thing, right? And so what we do when we want to enjoy and use them is that we essentialize them down to one particular quality and say that's the quality we would like to enjoy. And then let us step back out of the Borderlands and go back to our comfortable center, right? What else?
Using for profit, labor, or it could be confinement, prison systems, and private.
So I heard profit, labor, private, prison. That absolutely, that's a way that we think about, that's a way that the center views them. Another one?
Some of the center stay there and pretend that there isn't anybody outside.
Absolutely. They're invisibilized, right? We don't even know that they're out there unless we're going into a neighborhood. And then we say things like, we should be careful because once we cross over this border, now we're in a dangerous place, right? What else? I saw some more hands. Yes?
I don't know how to say this, but there's a sense of keeping them down. You don't want them to reach a level of education, or you don't want them to succeed.
Yeah. How about limit? Limit their success, limit education, limit their access.
Yeah.
Right? And we're going to get to access in just a moment. Yes?
I heard somebody say the other day, well, they're trashing up the United States just like they trashed up Mexico. It's some trashy or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and what an interesting way that we say those kinds of things about you messed up your own country, so you come here without any sort of responsibility of what the United States has done in those countries, creating war, profiting off of war, and then displacing people, and then being upset when they show up at our borders, right? So that's a great example. Thank you. Yes?
We started talking about unhealthy and bad teeth, and then we realized that what we didn't put in the other diagram was access to groceries.
Oh yeah.
Medical care.
There, we've got medical. Well, you said SNAP and Medicaid, but I think that's a really good distinction. That's not quality medical care, right? That's a centered belief. Since we're going to go back to beliefs, is that we deserve all of the quality care. We deserve the insurance because we have the full-time jobs with the 401ks and all of these plans in which to live. But yeah, absolutely.
We assume there are grocery stores everywhere.
Right. When there are food deserts, right? That there are places out here where the Borderlands people and culture out here do not have access, right? What else? Yes?
As a cause of something abnormal rather than as a consequence.
Oh, wow, that's well said. They're a cause as opposed to a consequence. Wow, that was powerful. Thank you. Yes.
Convert them to our way.
They need to be converted. And our way is all of these ways in the center, right? That time, which we talked about, and someone said, right? And if you don't adhere to the tenet of time, then you're being disrespectful, right? So we attach values to ways in which they do not adhere to those. What else?
This could be part of Trump, but I like the line from your where it said about I know I'm the Borderlands seeing the center as the tension grips them like a virus, but I think the center sees the Borderlands as a virus too.
Absolutely.
I mean, with gays and lesbians, like, you know, don't be friends with them, you're going to get it. Or don't, you know what I mean? There's
right.
a sense of that you're going to catch something back. So it's like a virus, a sickness.
I'm just going to say virus then, because I think you summed it up well. Yes.
That everyone wants to be like us.
Oh yeah, that we're number one. Right? We're number one. And you should want to have a college education. You should want to have all of these things. That's part of the setup that says, and if you have something different, then you're not normal. You're not standard. You're not good. A great example I just recently saw was in New Jersey, where there are these African, mostly from Ghana, Ghanaian hairdressers who only braid. They braid hair. And that the state of New Jersey is saying, no, you have to have a cosmetology license. That's what's normal and standard and good. And that will cost you about $20,000. Even though they're only working with their hands and a comb. No chemicals, they're not cutting hair, they're just braiding hair. So that's a way that there's an exploitation that happens there that says, you have to be like us, right? I think I saw maybe another hand. Yes?
I just want to say, converted ought to be in quotes, because that's a loaded term for Native Americans, for instance.
Absolutely, yes. The conversion of Native Americans, the conversion to our way of doing and being, right? Very good.
The power of the news media.
Say some more about that.
The influence, we didn't put it down below either, but somehow it depends which news you're getting, how it's related, how it's used, what pictures they show.
Oh yes, pictures are very, very interesting, right? And I think you're right, media influence has a lot there. Let's move to, how does the Borderlands view the center? What are some of the conversations you had at your table about how the Borderlands views the center? Yes?
This is really Jonetta's.
Okay.
Okay, she could, I asked her to see if she could enlighten us. And she went specifically to St. Pat's.
Okay.
Where we're both involved. Can I use the microphone there?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
It's very easy for us who work with people at St. Pat's to get very annoyed when we see the kids come in with cell phones and gorgeous hairdos, and the parents pick them up in really nice cars, and we say, and then they don't pay their tuition. Okay. Now, what Jonetta informed us of is they just, Jonetta, would you say how they feel?
Okay. For example, people of color or the kids at St. Pat's, their parents don't own homes, may not own homes, can't afford to buy homes, but they can buy a car. They can't afford to buy some of the other things that people do, but they can get their kid a cell phone. They may not have any other means of communication, computers, etc., but they could do that. So instead of us looking down and criticizing and complaining about and wanting to kick out and things like that, you know, we don't understand their, St. Pat's Board doesn't understand their culture. And another part of that is that these families may or may not understand that St. Patrick's is not a public school. It is not funded through taxpayers' money. And that's an educational piece, and I hate to use the word educational, but that's something that needs to be dealt with. And the Center of Borderlands don't understand that. And don't want to understand it.
I'm glad that you did explain that. So what I put on here is they're not worthy of the stuff. Yes, Mr. Blackwell?
So one of the views from the Borderlands of the center is envy.
Envy.
And the aspiration to reach that center.
Right, that we should want all of these things.
Yes.
And then, to the specific example,
Right.
when we do get them, we can't win.
Can't get that.
Right? You can't get all the way there, or the number of times where what we're doing is we're judging. It's a value judgment we're placing on someone who's accessing the things that we said is normal, standard, or good, and then judging them for actually having that particular thing. So there is an envy from the Borderlands to the center. What else?
And when that happens, then you begin to, we were talking about, you begin to regret who you are. So you don't even want to be who you are, and then you live into a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Absolutely.
And so then you become what they have defined for you.
Right. And the word for that is stereotype threat. That when you are a stereotype threat, you live into the very thing that that they say you are anyway. Right? You live into this way because that's what they think of me anyway. If they think that I'm lazy, I'm going to walk even slower across the street. Right? So, and that's a powerful thing. And I want you to think really deeply for a moment about what that must do to the person of color who lives that out. What must that do to their value and their humanity? The ways in which I've heard the ways in which I've heard us on our media talk about the people who are coming to this country. Cockroaches, rapists, murderers. It's a completely dehumanized way of being. So trying to think about, just couple that for a moment with this also very complex and contradictory desire to be in the center. That we simultaneously want what the center says is important while also being very upset with it and very dismissive of it because our humanity is torn apart in that. I saw another hand. Yes.
Some years ago, there was a book that came out with the title "Presumed Incompetent." Even if you have all the degrees, even if you have everything for the system, you are presumed incompetent. You have to prove yourself. It's difficult to have a tenure. It's difficult for a person of color to go through all the systems.
Yes, thank you for that. I put presumed incompetent, and then there's proof. That we have to prove that we belong. So we have to be, in some ways, hyper-educated, right? And we have to have all the letters behind our name. We have to give all kinds of credentials that say that we actually belong and we're supposed to be here, while at the same time working twice as hard and getting half as far, right? Say that? And earning half as much, right? And like the number one overeducated group in the United States with a master's degree plus are black women. Black women are overeducated in ways that they're not being compensated when they try to reach that center. Again, there's that tension here. I'm going to go and get all the things you say that I need, and then I'm going to go to your institutions and have you really dismiss me and tell me I don't know anything, or tell me that I was your diversity hire. Or tell me that the only reason that you hired me was because you needed some affirmative action numbers for your reporting to the United States government, right? These are things that happen. What else? How else does the Borderlands view the center here?
Amazingly patient.
Oh. I want you to say some more about that. She said they're amazingly patient.
I mean, they're the majority. They could rise up and smash the whole center.
They absolutely could.
But they have never done it yet. You know, rare occasions. Doesn't work.
I'll repeat it.
Rare occasions when they
Okay. So.
But they are crafty and sly, and they take great
pleasure in their own company
with figuring out how to get by, and they have a tremendous appreciation for the spirit within them, much better than the whole center. The center hardly sees there any spirit within them. They're actually denying that there is any spiritual life or a superior life or anything that really put them here in the first place. But the outer border people have a tremendous natural appreciation for their own spirit and ability interior. They see the outside as being destroyed, but they see that their interior is powerful.
Yeah, so I want to say some things. Thank you for that. There is this idea, I like what you said, they take pleasure in their own company, which really kind of is off by itself. It's not how they view the center, but there is a way of being where their survival is actually dependent upon this. And their survival is that we understand we actually have to access the center in order to get things. And yet, if we can't get into the center, we're going to stay out here in the Borderlands and appreciate what we have out here too. We actually do love what we have out here. The Borderlands is not a place of desolation. It's not a place of nothingness. It's a rich place where we're doing things out here in the Borderlands that are actually helping one another. We're sustaining our spirituality. We're sustaining our life, right? We're doing it in ways that we actually have to survive. And crossing over that border is an act of survival. Someone once said that it was crossing the border is the ways in which you think about when you cross a fence that has all the razor blades on it. You may cross, but you will get bloody in the process. You will not cross into that center and be completely unscathed. It will be harmful and it will be violent. So I'm going to go ahead and add that word since I'm sort of weaving this narrative, that the Borderlands views the center as a place of violence. I'll come back to you in a second. I've got a hand back here I haven't seen. Yes?
There's no assurance, I would think, no assurance that they will be treated with justice. In
Yes.
fact, there may be a conviction that there will be injustice.
Absolutely. So no assurance of justice. But the automatic thinking of this will be unjust. Whatever it is I'm experiencing, it will not be fair. I will not be treated equally. I will not be seen as a human being in the ways I'm doing this. I think I saw another hand. Yes, right here.
I think the families struggle with the love of who they are, with the children growing up wanting to become other. Am I correct?
Yes, you are. In a very, very damaging way. A damaging way that says, make yourself smaller, try to look more like the center, try to be like the center, but also simultaneously deny who you are. So I think about people who speak multiple languages. I think about a lot of my friends whose parents told them, don't speak Spanish. Don't speak Spanish because then you will not be seen as fully human in the United States. You will be seen as something is wrong with you. So denying a part of your culture. And then I think about the actual pain that comes with that, of not knowing how to speak to your family, not knowing the tongue of your grandmother, right? I think about the cultural ways in which we have completely erased people. Thank you for that. Yes. I see you back there. I'm coming there next.
Well, some of it was said about the unfairness and the violence and just a place of fear. And to add on to what you were saying, to fit in, it's not just language, but it's the names that they give. You don't want a name that's going to indicate that you are a person of color because right away you'll be dismissed. So your name is Kelly. I have John. And John is a very smart African-American young man, but his name's John. So what you do to take away some of that fear to fit. So
Absolutely. And since you used my name, I got to tell you, my mother is an Irish woman named Patty Sullivan. So there was no way I was not going to end up with some Irish. My sister's name is Erin. And yet, there is something that tells me that what would our names have been if my father didn't say, well, we want you to fit in too, right? That I would have a very different name. Thank you for that. I saw a hand, or you've got the mic, and then can you take it back there, please? Yes.
My nephews speak both Spanish and English equally well. When they went to school, they got teased because they spoke Spanish. And so their reaction is, I'm never going to speak Spanish again.
Right, so it's a denial. How else does the Borderlands view the center? Do you have a mic back here?
Yeah. I think it seems to me that on both sides, a very profound problem is mistrust. And I think it goes way back to history, way back in history, when the Africans came to our country. And that's something that has not been healed. It's distinct. It's not with Latinos. It's different with Latinos, and it's different with African Americans. And I think it's because of the history that we have in our country.
Yep. And Native Americans.
Yeah. Oh, Native Americans.
That mistrust was born from people who stole land, right? And committed genocide. And created all kinds of wars, right? That mistrust is for every person of color group. And yes, there is a distinct way in which we view all of those people of color groups very differently, right? And so how does that get put in place? I'm going to move this back up. Yep. So how does this remain in place? Because, as Mary Jean said to you, the white dominant center, this cultural way of being in the United States, is set up by that center. And yet, even people out here in the Borderlands believe that this particular setup is a good one. We're even convinced that this is the way we need to be. So this is harmful for both white people and people of color. This is a violent setup that makes it impossible for us to break out of until we can see it. Can you see it? Let me just ask that. Okay. Did you have another comment right here?
Well, I wasn't quite sure how to name it, but that the Borderlands people think that all of the people who would fit into the center have this equal amounts of power. In that I had a client who would have been seen as a Borderlands dweller asking me to get her grandchild into a Catholic school. I don't have any way to do that.
Right.
But that, and then, well, I didn't want to get her kid into the Catholic school. It was so I'm not quite sure how to name that, because I don't, as a white woman, I don't have the power to get a kid into a Catholic school. I'm not in that field at all. So it's very, it was confusing.
I think that maybe what you're naming is monolithic, that we assume that all white people do have this, that we assume that all white people have this, right? So that's part of the shame of us out here, that because we haven't accessed that, you guys all have it. You know how to get what you need. And sometimes the ways you know how to get what you need are really only as far as your skin color. That there are ways in which you can ask questions that people of color cannot. Right? This is why I don't use the term ally, I use the term accomplice. I need you to be an accomplice in this work. I need you to be willing to take risks and say, I don't know how to get you into that school, but I have enough connections, right? Because I have been seen as a very powerful person. So what is it that I can do? Or how can I, for lack of a better term, pass the mic to you? How can I amplify what you're saying so that it can actually get out there? And sometimes we use our white accomplices to say things. Sometimes I go to my white accomplices and say, I need you to say this in the room. I need you to say this in the room. And I need you to, and I'm going to say this in the room, and then I need you to say, I think she has a really good point. I think we should talk about that. I think this is going to help us have some conversations. To me, that's an accomplice. That's different. And I need accomplices in all kinds of systems. So let's think about this. Along the border are all the systems that we have that create and manage and distribute all the resources necessary to live. So we have a system of education. That system of education, everyone has to access, right? Everybody has to use it. And that encompasses all kinds of institutions. Preschool, K-12, higher education, textbook companies, after-school programs. That's all in the system of education. What's another system that we have? Healthcare. I'm just going to put letters here. I'm not writing everything out. And under healthcare, we have hospitals, visiting nurses, doctor's offices, insurance, right? Dentists, right? I never, for the life of me, can understand why I pay for insurance and it doesn't include my teeth. It's a part of my body, or my eyes, right? Or ears, right? What's another system?
Finance.
Housing, I heard housing. I heard transportation.
Finance.
Finance and banking.
Shopping.
Yeah, retail.
Legal.
The legal institution. Oh, there we go. I can't believe it took you all the way around the circle. I mean, I thought for sure it would be the very first one. So religious institutions, right, that include not just churches and mosques and temples, but are also our schools. Do you see how all of these places are sort of tied up? And I often tell people, you know, this system of education, we can't really talk about it in a silo. You know why? It's connected to housing. Where you live is where you go to school. And you know what? That's actually connected to transportation, because now I have to get there. Right? So the ways in which all of these systems work together, they're actually built for the center. But everyone has to access it. Everyone has to find a way to get there, because they're producing everything we need in order to live. And yet, institutions are made up of people. Most often people in the center who keep it going. Although, we do have people from the Borderlands who work in institutions as well, who also keep it going. Because we're not recognizing that we're actually complicit in this relationship. We're not recognizing that I've actually been upholding this thing that I wanted to fix. I always use the example of education because when I was a classroom teacher, I of course noticed disparities. I noticed all kinds of things, not just with my textbooks that were 90% European history. I'm supposed to know all of white people's history. But to know my own history, I have to elect and take an elective and choose to do it outside of what I'm supposed to know about you. So people in the Borderlands, we have to be bicultural. We have to understand this culture here as well as this culture here. And we actually have to find ways in which to live into this with your cultures so that we can access this. Yes?
Did you put sports in there?
Absolutely. Sports is another one. That's an institution. Think about the racism in sports. Think about the racism in football and who gets used for that, and then who continues to have CTE, to have head trauma, right? And that brings me back to a word we used before, expendable, right? We only need you for your labor and nothing else. And please move back out, right? We often say that people in the center get to take a field trip out here to the Borderlands to go help and fix and save. But people in the Borderlands, we just have a day pass. We get to get in there, then we're reminded we have to get out. We're criminalized in all kinds of ways that are harmful to us. So after our break, which we're about to take, after our break, what we're going to do is we're going to be thinking very specifically about your institution, about ways in which we are keeping this particular thing in place. And we're going to be digging deep. And I want to say a couple of things about that. One, this is going to be a difficult assignment. And I know it's going to be difficult. And I want you to wrestle with it. I want you to say, okay, I got to think about this differently. But when you are struggling and when you find yourself at a place where you're going, I can't think of this, think of this setup. Think of the things that we named.